I'm here with Dana Shears, and he does a lot of work as a salesperson, as a business manager in the Americas, South America, North America, and even he's done work in Europe as
Yes.
well. I will let him do a better introduction. I'll turn it over. Here he is.
Okay. Hello. Thanks for the opportunity. I'll just give you a brief background. The company I work for is European based. We're a privately held company, family company in Germany. We're of the order of 300 million euros in terms of total turnover. We've got several divisions, but the division I represent is focused on healthcare. And basically, we're involved with pharmaceutical companies around the world, assisting them in efforts to develop inhalation drugs for the treatment of asthma and COPD. And our company is manufacturing based, so we're specialists in metal forming and plastics. And so we provide a lot of the componentry and final devices for products that are being utilized worldwide for those treatments. I'm based here in North Carolina. I'm responsible for sales and business development in the Americas for my division. The company is called Presspart, a little known company to people outside of the pharmaceutical world. We service about 80% of the global market in terms of componentry for asthma inhalers. To give you some perspective, there are about 750 million inhalers, these press and breathe inhalers that people use, 750 million used on an annual basis. These are manufactured throughout the world, not only from the big conglomerate companies that you would recognize like GlaxoSmithKline or AstraZeneca, Boehringer Ingelheim, the ones that you see on television, but there are a lot of companies that are regionally based, and they're producing products, not only generic products, but also innovative products for their own markets. And so a lot of times there's government intervention and assistance to be able to provide companies with opportunities to manufacture in a local region. So Sandy's asked me to talk a little bit about some of the aspects of dealing as a European company, as an American company, with challenges, especially within other regions of the world. Again, my focus is really from North America all the way to Patagonia in South America. I've been in the industry for about 25 years. I'm actually not a business professional by degree. My degree is in engineering. I did get a Bachelor of Science in Engineering and spent about 5 years practicing as an engineer, but really found my niche in dealing with people and had a strong desire to travel the world on somebody else's dime, so which is I've managed to satisfy. So, in any event, we currently have 3 sites of manufacture, all of which are European based. Our products are sent to manufacturing locations as far as China, to a major presence in India, and then again throughout Central and South America. So there are a whole host of aspects of dealing in those companies that maybe I can touch upon. Any specific questions to guide me?
Specifically, how does your main parent company, how do they coordinate working in all the different countries?
Well, we operate with a very small sales and business development force. We don't rely on any local agents or distribution houses to get our products there. We're fortunate enough that we're well known in the pharmaceutical industry, and it is a very niche sector. If you look at the total pharmaceutical world, most of the drugs being produced are either in tablet or liquid form, and we've got a kind of a specialty here in aerosols. Also, what assists us is that a lot of the major companies that do these products are European based, so the technology resides in Europe, so that's a good starting point for us to be able to liaise with the Glaxos in the world in their backyard and in our backyard. The challenges become as we start to distribute our products and send our products for commercialization in various regions. because of regulations. Our product, as you might imagine, pharmaceutical, is highly regulated, and those regulations differ from market to market, from country to country. In addition, we've got to take strong consideration on tariffs, specialty taxes, importation, exportation laws, and so you've got to be well cognizant and be able to work around those. Obviously, there are competitors out there, so we don't have 100% of the worldwide market. So there are both global competitors and regional competitors. And also, within our organization itself, since we supply a large share of the world market, we quite often are competing against ourselves. So the same product that I may sell to a company in India that's being distributed in Costa Rica, for example, they're competing against my client that's trying to develop products in his own backyard. Mm. So there's a lot of factors that are in play here that, as you try to craft a business model to go into these areas, you need to be cognizant of and be totally aware and be able to work through it.
When you're working in, say, South America, and you're trying to introduce either a new product into an existing country or any of your products into a country you've not worked in before, what do you look at to try to ensure you're going to be successful to do that?
Well, a couple of things come to mind. Obviously, you've got to build a value proposition to be able to focus on the market that you're serving. So a complete understanding of all the regulations that are necessary to even have your product considered for adoption into the area. You talk about a value proposition. I look at it in three aspects. I look at it in terms of price, I look at it in terms of quality, and then I look at it in terms of serviceability. How can I best effectively service the market? Is it lead time? Is it stock on hand? Is it, a stock that's being held at a third-party location that we can split and divvy up? So those aspects certainly. For pharma, we've also got to take into account that certain companies within these regions are part of larger conglomerates. So NAFTA being one of them, Mercosur, especially in Latin America, is a number one of those. So there are member nations and there are not member nations that are party to that. So the regulations vary quite often in a fluid relationship. Also within those regions, politics obviously play a major role. So we're undergoing somewhat of a crisis in Brazil at the moment. The last time I looked, there wasn't an official president. Right. We just changed presidents in Argentina. So a lot of the things that we were dealing with in the past, namely collecting money or being extorted for sale of goods and other things, and that reminds me of a story I'll tell in just a second. But anyway, those things are so dynamic that you've always got to be aware of what's happening within the region. So the story I wanted to just quickly tell is that we had an importer of wines it was an exporter of cars from Germany to Argentina. And this was about 2 years ago, and I think it was either BMW or Mercedes. They were exporting cars into Argentina, and the president at the time and the trade commissioner said, no, we have to have equal for equal, so you must take wine back. So every container load of cars had to be reciprocated with a container of wine. So these are things that go on a regular basis in these regions.
Okay, so what do you have to trade for your medical apparatus?
Well, fortunately for us, especially in some of these regions where they have very tight controls on import and export, fortunate for us, there is no local supplier that offers equivalent quality for the products that we have registered in those companies. Okay. I draw a parallel to China, for example. It took us almost 10 years to get our products properly registered by the local authorities there. They have SFNDA, which is the equivalent of the FDA that's situated in China. And the process for approval of foreign components, foreign excipients, or whatever is very, very rigorous and very tedious and very expensive. So a lot of planning needs to take place, a lot of information, a lot of understanding, a lot of planning, and a lot of patience to be able to tackle this.
And how do you get around being the ugly American when you're visiting all these places around the world? Because I'm sure you've heard that before.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've always listened. Well, let me just back up. If you look at any business relationship, any business situation, any decision that's being made is a decision between individuals. And quite often, it's an emotional decision. Okay? It's not just often facts and figures. It's somebody making the decision where he feels comfortable to buy, to allow a transition to happen. And he's doing that not only on the dollars and cents, but on his faith in you to honor whatever commitment you've made. So I think first and foremost, you take the time, you understand the culture. You take the time to embed yourself into the culture, to thoroughly understand it, and then you build yourself personal relationships with individuals within these organizations, and they become your allies. Okay, they start to trust in you. You start to build trust in them, and then they provide somewhat of a roadmap into these organizations to assist you ultimately in those efforts to move forward. So again, one of the biggest things that I can encourage anyone to traveling to a new area is, don't be afraid, explore, learn to adapt. We have a culture here of where, if the food isn't on the table by 5 or 6 o'clock, well, you go to Argentina and you're lucky if you can get a table at midnight because they're starting dinner at 11 and there are people still there at 2. So you have to be prepared to adapt and participate and understand. There are numerous books and tapes about these idiosyncrasies of different cultures and do's and don'ts in those areas. So, those guys should take a look at that. I mean, we're much more of a global society now, so a lot of those have disappeared over the years. But it's still worth, taking a look at and be cognizant of that as you start to explore into these different areas.
Do you find that language can be a barrier?
Language can be a barrier, especially to Americans, because most Americans only speak one language. I am fortunate in the fact that I deal in a highly educated environment. I deal mostly with research scientists and PhDs, and all of which have been taught some English at some level. But I encourage anyone that's attempting to deal in a different culture, a different language, is to learn the basics. Okay? Learn how to say hello, learn how to say goodbye, learn how to ask questions, and learn how to get around. And don't be so reliant on somebody else to translate, to provide every single direction that you're in. Feel free to get lost and feel free to explore. And they greatly appreciate that. I can't overstress that enough. They greatly appreciate, your attempt to embed yourself in their culture and their language.
Okay, great. So I was thinking about different customs that you must have encountered, like to hold a business meeting in the U.S., usually you set a time, people show up, you have your meeting, you've got an agenda, you follow it, you're done. I'm certain that in different cultures around the world, to hold a business meeting is very different than what we're used to in the U.S.
It is, and that's something that you have to be patient with. You have to adapt to their culture and understanding. It only takes the first meeting to either frustrate you or encourage you. Because for me personally, there's a lot to be said about the Latin culture.
Hmm.
People often say mañana, 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 but it's their culture. And if you attempt to circumvent that or to force your ways and beliefs on them, it's going to be a disaster. So you have to learn to adapt. Um, so if, for example, you're in a somewhat boardroom that has folding chairs and none of the chairs match and some of them are broken and people are wandering in and out and continuously, it's normal for them.
Hmm.
So you cannot let that distract you. You have to stay focused on task at hand. You have to have a good understanding of, what's going on and what's driving their thoughts and their cultures. And ultimately, you'll be accepted more so and more quickly than somebody else. I work for a German company. A lot of my colleagues are very, very German, very strict. They would dare not show up to a meeting without a 10-page agenda and are going to tick the box in every single question. And when they come to Latin America and even America, they're really struggling because they're thinking that this is not working. The meeting is not going to work. We're not going to have a deal. But at the same time, it's totally opposite.
Right.
So,
And how about when it actually comes to putting pen to paper and signing contracts? Are there different styles of negotiating?
well,
Or is a negotiation a negotiation?
contract is an interesting thing because I've got one of my largest customers at the moment is based in Buenos Aires in Argentina, and he is so afraid to put pen to paper. And we've been an exclusive supplier for the last 13 years, doing business without a contract. And yet every time I take a formal piece of paper to him, he said, why do we need a contract? We've been doing business for 13 years. This is our way. You have my word. And it's a handshake. So, it's just a different way of doing business.
I can't imagine that drives the German guys
It
crazy.
drives the German guys crazy.
I've heard that in other cultures. The Japanese are very much honor-based, and they don't like to, sign contracts. Now, Americans love, like you and I were talking earlier, get the best deal we can,
Yeah.
Do you find other cultures to be the same?
Depending. It's a very litigious society here.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yes.
we're quick
Mm-hmm.
to sue. We are always worried about what's going to go wrong instead of what's going to go right. Whereas other cultures are focused on it must be right because
Mm-hmm.
we have a deal.
Okay.
It must be right. So there's less emphasis on that. Also, we're a much more highly regulated market
Mm-hmm.
than, let's say, the pharmaceutical companies in other regions of the world. So there's less likely for something to come up that's going to cause a contractual or a legal effect that's likely to impact either party. So it's the negotiation remains somewhat the same because again they're looking at what's the value proposition you have to offer. How is it going to ensure my personal success within my organization? And then more importantly, how is it going to ensure, the livelihood of the employees within the organization?
Sure.
Is this the best deal for me? Is this the best deal for the company, etc.? And I think, too, that differs enormously when you talk about small privately held companies. So I deal, a company in El Salvador that makes probably 500,000 inhalers a year. It's still all family-run business.
Oh, wow.
And what they worry about is, the success of their product being able to enable them to continue to employ the people.
Mm-hmm.
And so their success is their ability to competitively market the product against Glaxo and the big guys around the world, so that they can give longevity of employment to their employees.
Wow.
So
That's nice.
yeah, I mean it's really such a different environment.
Hmm.
It's more of a homey family approach as opposed to this corporate, dinosaur
Yeah.
that we're often dealing with. But the same aspects of service and quality and price still hold true.
Yeah. That's good to hear. Um, Ethics. Do you run into issues? Are there certain countries I think that aren't as ethical as we would like them to be?
Not as much these days as it used to be.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's good
so
to hear too.
going back 20 years, when I was dealing with companies, especially in Spain, quite often they would say, send it white, which meant the goods would arrive and then a white paper bag would arrive with the goods with some little donation to the cause.
Hmm.
Um, we still see some of that in Saudi Arabia, in Egypt, and some of those regions of the world. At least my colleagues are telling me that. But in Latin America, no, I don't.
No,
I don't
good.
run into it because again, it's ethical products that we're supporting, which are
Hmm.
regulated ultimately by a medical body of some sort.
Okay. All right. That's all I have for you. You got anything else to add?
No, I just encourage your students to stay the course. If you are interested, as I'm sure you are in international business, um, just develop the best understanding that you can. Be adventurous. Get out there, experience it. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to take risks. And most importantly, as I've learned over the last 25 years, um, make friends. I've been fortunate to travel the world. Somebody else is paying for it, but I have a whole host of friends, lifelong friends that I've built over the years that I will cherish forever. So, good luck.
All right. Thank you.